I'll do my
Now
best.
recording.
Oh, okay.
Right. So I will say welcome again then. It's so lovely to see people's faces that I know, and people's faces that I don't know. So it's great to gather around this chat. And I hope at the end of this we will know each other a little bit better. We'll have a little bit of a chew through some of the things that Rob and I are grappling with, some of which you'll know we're grappling with already. Yeah. So just as Michaela already said, if you want to speak at any time, then I'm happy for us just to leave our voices unmuted. Just stick your hand up in the usual Proust, keep saying Proust, the Zoom kind of way, and just let it be known that you want to contribute to the chat, or you can stick something in, the sort of written chat bit, and Michaela will keep our eyes glued to that as well. Yeah, my intention is that we guillotine this meeting at no later than an hour and a half, and we're 5 minutes in already. I think that's more than long enough for a meeting, probably too long actually. So if we're flagging before then we'll I did circulate a bit of a list of questions. We may get through that list. We may start that list and get nowhere near the end of it. But I just thought it would be useful for me to have something that we refer to, and just to help us guide the chat. So I hope maybe you've all had sight of that, but if you haven't, it doesn't really matter. But I think the place to start is just some introductions. So my request is that we talk to three things, that we say where we are, what we do and what's our passion, or what we do or what is our passion, and then what brought us to this discussion. So yeah, I will. Rob, would you like to go first? I bet you're wearing shorts, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you would
Yeah.
be.
I wear shorts all the year round. It's so
Rob's about as
sunny.
far from me as it's possible to get and still be in the UK. So on you go, Rob.
Well, so I'm in Jersey, as most of you will know. What brought me here? What do I do? Oh, what I do is I work for a social enterprise, which is the posh way, which works with people or gives employment and training to people with long-term health conditions or disabilities, which is quite grand because really what I do is work in a second-hand shop. Okay, so I just happen to work with these people, with some of those people who are great. And what is my passion? Well, in this context, my passion is to see whether we can get Proust up and running again, I suppose. I have as I've said to most people, I've spoken to almost everybody on this call, but not everyone. So it's nice to see some new people, meet some new people. I've no agenda. I never did have an agenda apart from asking everyone the same question, which was, do they have any thoughts about doing Proust? And that's why I'm here, because it's partially my fault, but mainly Chris's fault, because because Chris contacted me earlier in the year and said, "Well, stop talking about it. Why don't we do something?" And then it ended up recording our conversations, which is I never ever expected to do a podcast. So there we go. I'm going to stop talking now. That's 3 sentences, a bit more than 3 sentences. Unless I'm being Pauline, in which case it's one long sentence with no grammar.
Thank you, Rob. I suppose if we go along the line, I'm Chris. I'm based in Argyll, not too far from Dunoon, for those of you that may know the geography of Scotland. And I suppose at the moment, I make a living through making pottery or making art, if we want to be really grand and vainglorious about it, because it sounds so much better than making pots, doesn't it? So really, I just make pots. So yeah, what brought me to this discussion was pretty much as Rob described. It's fond memories of what Proust was, and starting to increasingly get immersed in thinking about what next and what happens. Well, what happens to the way of faith in the UK in the absence of the sort of institutional forms of faith that we previously had known. So yeah, that's myself, Michaela, who is hiding behind a very strange name, which you might need to explain as well.
Yeah, I don't play the fiddle. I'm using Emily, our daughter's business Zoom account, so that we don't get booted off at 45 minutes. And her and Will, our son, have a business called Mac Teller, teaching Scottish trad music, and so that's why we're using that. I'm here to take minutes and do Zoom hosting stuff, but also I live in the same house as Chris, and so I'm in the room next door. Also do pottery for a living.
Thank you.
We're very grateful for you doing this very important role, because as anyone who's listened to any of the podcasts knows, me and Chris have absolutely no idea how it works. And usually I can't even get my headphones or microphone to work. Neither of them ever in tandem. So there we go. It's great to have somebody on board.
Dish out the thanks until this has actually worked.
Well, I did see a button that said recording, so that's got to mean something, isn't it?
That remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Steve, you're muted, by the way, in case. There you go.
I'm Steve. I'm in West London, in Ealing, West London. What do I do? I earn a living by as an investigator with the financial regulator. So I spend most of my day looking at spreadsheets or interviewing people who've walked off with other people's money. So that's what I do during the day. My passion is creative writing, whether that's poetry, which is mostly what I do, or I've come across the term fast fiction, or so I'm trying my hand at writing a bit more other than poetry. But it was my boss at work who criticised about 20 years ago, said I need to go on a writing course because my report writing wasn't up to scratch compared to the lawyers I worked with. So end up doing a poetry course, and then some years later handed him first anthology that I was included in, which was the one created by Proust. Told him it was his fault that I'd become a poet. What brought you to this discussion? My thankfulness for Proust, including me in that first anthology, and showing me there's other people out there who are like-minded, which had introduced me to this community. So I'm grateful for that, and that's what whets my appetite for seeing what happens next.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. So Mark and Leanne, you get to decide who goes first.
You want to go first?
Can do. So, yeah, I'm Leanne. We're up near Hull, near the Humber Bridge. So I have two hats. I'm a chaplain, a mental health chaplain in the NHS, and I also work for the Methodist Church in something called the Kairos Movement, which is exploring how we might be a community of people questioning and drawing on the ancient stories. And yeah, I resonate with a lot of what you've been saying, Chris, about what next, but how, yeah, trying to work that out as a bit of a community. Yeah, and that's what brings me here, really. I think I tapped into Chris's blog and have appreciated some of that conversation. We've used things from Proust in the past, and I do think the future is in the arts and in activism and in story, really. So yeah, your turn.
So Mark, and my day job is a photographer. So that covers sort of historically that's been my career from being 17, so quite a long time now. So that covers sort of everything from food to people, sort of educational establishments like medical school and university and things like that. And I work for a couple of human rights charities, Amos Trust, you may have come across. So that's my day job. I'm currently sort of looking at the third act of my career, I suppose, at the moment, and looking at doing some sort of mentoring. I've got this sort of idea at the moment to sort of try and mentor young storytellers in photography and sort of develop a community in that as well. So I'm just sort of in the process of trying to work that out and work out how I can do that as a part-time job, really, and cut down on my commercial work. So, and I was introduced to Proust through Leanne, really, because Leanne used it as a resource network on projects that we've done together when we wanted to sort of do things a bit more creatively in services or gatherings. Services isn't really what we do, is it? But yeah, so that's us, really. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Frankie.
Hi, so I'm Frankie. I live in Renfrewshire, which is about 20 minutes west of Glasgow. I've lived here for 23 years, originally from Bedford. What do? So I just started a new job with the NHS Education for Scotland in the spiritual care team. So developing as an educator in spiritual care. So I started that on Monday, so that's very exciting. But I also work part-time for doing the community development work for my local church here as well. But it's very much about reaching out to anybody in the community to support them in whichever way I can with bereavement, mental health, dementia, and isolation. So what brought me here was through that role, actually. I did some work with Chris and Michaela. We ran some creative bereavement workshops, poetry and clay, and they were fabulous, really, really supported people. So then got to know Chris and Michaela a bit more, and I had never heard of Proust at all until I listened to your podcast last week. So I'm still trying to get my head around what it is, who they are, what they are. But Chris thought I might quite enjoy coming along for a chat tonight. So that's what's brought me here. So it's nice to be here.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Frankie. That's really, yeah.
Deb.
Sorry, it took me ages to find that unmute button for some reason. So I live in a little village near Milton Keynes, so not far from Bedford, which is a coincidence. And I am a writer and artist. The way I make my money is that I rent out a flat. So far, most of the things I make haven't made that much money, but I still manage to get along and be very busy all the time. So I also do some workshops, primarily writing because that's my background. But I'm also looking to do more creative workshops. I've just started painting recently. And I also run quiet garden movement sessions in our local quiet garden nearby. So I'm now affiliated with them as well as a host. I don't have my own space, but I can use other spaces. So I'd like to do more of that. And how did I hear about this? So I had a few short readings just digitally published with Proust, I think towards the end of its natural life, perhaps. And they were just up there for free. So I can't quite remember how I heard about it, but I'm guessing it's through Greenbelt or through somebody I met at Greenbelt or something like that.
Di Smith?
Yeah, I do know. I've worked quite a lot with Cy, but that's been more recent. So I'm still not certain how it came about because it was quite a long time ago. But anyway, but yes, I definitely worked with Cy for a long time. So and then Rob just got in touch to ask if anybody was interested. So I said yes. So that's me.
Thank you very much. Alison, you're muted.
I'm in the south side of Glasgow, and I've recently moved back up here after about 30 years in both London and Oxford. So it's all still quite new. Been home as it is for a year, and I'm a minister in the Scottish Episcopal Church in the South Side, a small church called St Oswald in Kings Park. I've known about Proust for a long time, and I've used quite a number of their resources over the years in different guises. And I hail from Dunoon, which is how, and I know Chris and Michaela, so I kind of put my connection in. So, yeah, that's me.
You were also an editor on one of the Proust anthologies.
Yeah,
as
I
well.
was. That's true. Although I think, to be fair, Chris, you got me through that editing.
Oh, I think we got each other through it.
Yeah, but it was yeah. So I aspire to write, but life gets in the way, which is a lack of discipline rather than anything else. But there we are. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. And Matt.
Thanks so much.
Evening, everyone. I'm Matt. I'm down in Rugby, Warwickshire. What am I doing at the moment? What's my passion? At the moment, I'm having a midlife crisis. So that's both career-wise and creativity. So I'm exploring those in different ways. The last few days, I've been ripping up concrete from a £1 million apartment down the road in Leamington because it's paying me a day rate. Other than that, I've just come out of a few years of charity governance and management and youth work, about a decade or so, probably longer. I was one of the first, pilot pioneers on the CMS course with Johnny Baker. And that unfortunately didn't lead anywhere in my explorations and exited the church at that point, really, about 10 years ago. So I come to this conversation in a way via 30 odd years of Greenbelt, knowing Johnny, and also creativity around the church world, of which I'm no longer in, but very much into entrepreneurial endeavors, creativity, photography and poetry is my passion. I've never really done anything with it. I think both of my attempts are quite poor, so I've kept it to myself. But I have challenged myself this year to write a poem a day, and I've been getting somewhere with it. Not always happening, but I've got an attempt to get 52 good ones by the end of the year. So we'll see where we get. So I'm challenging myself in different ways, and it feels like a very turbulent change after being exited out of my latest job in January, and now just scrabbling for what's next, but trying to develop my own business, which is why Motivate Interactive is on the screen, because that's an intervention for young people around mental health and physical well-being. That's me.
Thank you. I should add to that is that I shanghaied Matt because Matt has lots of experience about the sorts of mechanisms that an organisation might use to incorporate itself, whether that is a partnership or a cooperative or a company limited by guarantee or a charity. And we kind of think that at some point we'll have to grapple some of that. So it's really amazing to know people that know stuff about that, because I don't really. Chris.
Fabulous.
Oh, Michaela's got a hand up. Sorry, Chris. Just
sorry, before Chris does that, where did you send the agenda, Chris? Because if I'm going to take notes, I need it, and I can't find it.
I posted it in the group chat on the Proust Facebook group. So that's probably the easiest place to get it without me coming to give you a copy from another room. I don't have a spare copy, so.
Hello, I've got it up on the screen. Do you want me to post it into the chat?
Oh, okay.
Look at that. It's like somebody knows how to do things with computers.
I know how to do Zoom and click record, but finding the Proust chat is beyond me.
Okay.
Sorry, Chris. Carry on, Chris Foston. Sorry.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Thank you.
It's in the chat.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think my fear, whenever you try and do two things, have that screen on, and then try and do something in the side, is that you're going to either display something that you shouldn't do, or everything turns off and then you've lost it forever. So, yeah.
You know, the
Sorry.
answer, Ron, the
What's
answer to
that?
that is having two screens.
Oh, yes. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Sorry, Chris Boston.
Hi everyone, I'm another Chris. I am in, I guess, so I'm in a place called Green Street Green, which is sort of on the very border of Kent and southeast London at the moment. Although in the next 2 or 3 months we'll be moving to Dorset. So yeah, so the south anyway, the far south. What I do at the moment, I work for a medical trade union that may or may not currently be in multiple disputes with the government. I look after a couple of groups of doctors, committees, working out their policy, liaising with other people, and writing reports and minutes. So I'm quite glad someone else is taking minutes today. My passion, I think, is finding ways of expressing faith creatively. I'm still involved in a church, in fact, an elder of a United Reformed Church up here at the moment. Although for a very long time, 15, maybe 20 years, I've been on the edge of church, really. And I've always been the one trying to do something slightly different, which has felt like a lonely path sometimes. So, yeah. I come to this discussion, I think, having been a long time user of Proust. I think starting when they first published those Labyrinth kits back in the day, and then turning pretty regularly to whatever resources I could get my hands on that weren't the regular stuff I would find in churches. But then later on, I got involved in the poetry collections. I think I was an editor for the second one, having been published in the first, and I have my own collection of poems published shortly after that. And I've been in fairly regular contact with Chris and Michaela, and I've spoken to Rob. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm here as an enthusiastic, creative, and supporter, I think.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Well, that inevitably took a while, but I think it is important because we kind of need to know one another a bit, don't we? One of the first things that Rob and I were talking about as to how we did this, and I think he's partially right in saying, let's do it on a podcast. Let's make it out there. It was because what we're trying to do is to build a network of people who are interested in what we're trying to do, who get what we're trying to do. To some, obviously we're all busy with multiple other things. We're prepared to, at some point, be involved in the process. So I suppose the corporate parlance would be building community, wouldn't it, around what we're trying to achieve? Not that we really know fully what we're trying to achieve. So all of these things are being worked out probably in real time. But our hope is that through these kinds of discussions, through some of the chats that we're trying to target through the podcast, that we start to kind of build a clearer idea of what this is all about and what we're going from. But one of the podcasts that we had was with Johnny Baker, who's already been mentioned, which was very much a retrospective, looking backwards. So it might be just useful to spend a little bit of time, if anybody wants to, just reflecting a little bit on those memories. I mean, Ali mentioned the Labyrinth kit, which many of us, that was our first kind of, that was Rob and I's entry into Proust as well.
Yeah.
But I suppose one of the things that we're asking about what Proust was, and I know some of you maybe have no idea because you maybe weren't around and didn't use it, but what of that can we preserve and should we preserve? What about that is something that you guys would want to see us carry forward?
Can I kick off?
Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah. So So I was fortunate enough to bump into Johnny in the early 2000s through his local church, St Mary's. So in a few years before that, I was part of a church plant with the vineyard, and the plant closed quite soon after it started, which left us in a new house with 2 young kids wondering what on earth we were doing. And we church hopped for a while and found that Johnny Baker, he was introduced to us, I can't remember how, but they had a once a month service called Grace, which was on a Saturday night, which was just tried different ways of expressing worship. And I was never an Anglican by orientation, so it was all a bit new to me. But what I really appreciate from that community was a willingness to use creativity and to accept new ideas on how to express worship. And that's what attracted me to that gathering. And then it was Johnny who approached me and said, I understand you write poetry. And my first thought was, who told you that? Because it was a very private thing for me. But he persuaded me to submit some poems, which was included in that first collection. And what came out of that was, for me, just opening my eyes to there was a lot of people who thought like me, but spread all over the country, who and that was part of a new journey for me of just opening my eyes to not just a local church, but to a broader community of creative thinkers. And then you said the agenda, what we'd like to preserve. I think what attracts me most is the community. I am plugged into a local church. I love the local church. I think for me, it's an essential part of how I worship, how I seek to serve God. And they are a creative bunch, and they are very receptive to new ideas. But I recognise there's a lot more than just a local church out there. So what we'd like to preserve is that sense of community and sense of being willing to be creative about how we express our love for God and express worship.
Thanks,
Brilliant,
Steve.
Steve. Thank
Yeah.
you. Anyone else got any thoughts on that? Michaela?
Yeah, I've not had any anything directly from Proust apart from the labyrinth, using the, being part of a group that used the labyrinth kit. But I just remember the joy of the first things that were published, that you had published through Proust, Chris, and seeing the books and seeing it hard, the hard copy of those things. And but I think it would be great if we could find a way to keep doing that for people that I don't have that way otherwise of getting things published. Maybe just if you can link people into a wider community, so it's not just sending things to editor after editor, but rather an encouraging and supportive community, then I think that would be a great thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Leanne?
Just for me, having somewhere to go for resources, because quite often it's good to create stuff together, but sometimes you need a catalyst, and just knowing you've got somewhere, particularly with people coming from on the same sort of page. So creating a set of resources, I think, I really valued.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are still a lot of resources that were on the old Proust website that are now not available anywhere else. There's lots of things there that may still have legs, they may still have a use. So it would be great to try and find a way of re-showcasing them if they're still wanted and needed, which is maybe part of the discussion we'll be coming on to have later. Yeah.
And
Alex?
just to pitch in there, can I just pitch in there that we are in the process of trying to get hold of whatever existed on the last Proust website. We're trying to get hold of those materials. It's a work in progress. It will happen. It will happen.
I Ironically, I think I've been told it maybe about 5 or 6 times now, there's including another one today, that the old Proust website is now a porn portal, which is unfortunate, to
It
say
is
the least.
unfortunate.
We have tried to
Yes.
see if there's a way that we can kind of, I don't know, divest ourselves from the new Proust business, but it does seem that unfortunately the ownership of that URL has lapsed, and so
Yes.
it has now been either appropriated, in which case you'd think that at some point it will cease. You know, the provider, the owner of the URL, whoever that is, presumably if it's gone back to the original host provider, then and hopefully they will eventually kick off who is using it. But although it is possible that someone has bought that address and is now using it legitimately for their illegitimate purposes, if you see what I mean.
Well,
Anyway.
never turn down a sponsorship opportunity. That's what I say.
Ali, you had your
open negotiations.
Ali, and then yourself, Deb, if that's okay.
I think I also agree with sorry, I've forgotten your name, that's terrible. Mark and
Leanne.
Sorry, Leanne. I think I'm with Leanne. For me, it's been a really useful source of resources for leading worship for me over the years. And I mean, there are other sources out there. I mean, I find myself going to Iona and all sorts of other places, Christine Sign and various things, but Proust has been good. And it would be a shame not to be able to still use what's there, if that makes sense. You know, if it's there at the moment, these things can, I mean, they're often quite timeless, so they would be of use. Yes, and I think I liked what Michaela said about creating a space where people can bring their art, their creativity to, and there's a space for that to be shared within a sort of safe community. I think would be something that's quite helpful for folk. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Deb?
Yeah, I just had a quick question, which might be daft, I don't know, but can you tell me where the name came from? Proust.
Yes. Well,
yes, we can.
It just so happens that we can.
Okay, great.
It doesn't have quite the sort of Latin theology that led into a deep epiphany. It was 3 blokes in a pub, one of whom was Dutch, who raised his beer while they were talking about doing something called Proust, and he said Proust, and they said that's what we'll call it.
So it's something like that. It's Dutch for cheers or something, I guess.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, the name itself was almost irrelevant to what it became, but yeah, I suppose as a way to call an organization, that's probably as good as any.
Yeah.
Matt?
Yeah, one thing when I encountered Proust for the first time as a youth worker, I felt it was edgy and speaking a language that no one else was, which is why I started using the resources and bringing it into worship or any available situation I could. And I felt it was gritty and had substance and made people think differently. So I think they're quite important things to keep hold of. We've just talked about the name. I quite like the name and the branding of it. I think it always sort of looked cool. It stood out from the other stuff that's rolled out by big companies. And I think it's important to keep it's already been mentioned a few times, with the collective nature of what can't be done individually, but can be dreamt of because a number of people put their minds to making something happen, which is part of creativity that I like, is joining together to see what is almost bringing the impossible into reality with collective effort.
Chris?
Just to follow on from that, I think to agree with pretty much what everyone else has said, but I think the thing that I valued about Proust when I came across it for the first time was that it was something that expressed faith or gave you resources, but didn't ignore the world outside. And that for me was really important, having grown up in quite a gentle, insular church world, to have something that would actually give me a chance to explore something spiritual in a way I could relate to from my daily life was extremely important. And it was something I think that continued doing all the way to the end, particularly with music. I think that I don't know whether music would be part of what we see happening in the future, but that was the most obvious expression of that idea to me, where all the other kind of Christian music I came across was, I don't want to be rude about it, but it wasn't for me. It was quite teddy bear like kind of expressions of love for Jesus that while I didn't disagree with it, it wasn't how I experienced the world or faith or anything. And Proust had, dance music and, I think that is important. Yes, edgy, but relatable as well. I think that's important.
Thanks, Chris.
Michaela?
Yeah, just to say, I don't know if everybody can see the chat, but Steve was just agreeing with Chris about things being edgy. And I just wanted to say I really liked the way you put that, Matt, that it's things that can't be done individually but can be dreamt of together or something like that. A really lovely way of putting it.
Just as a slight connection with, what you're saying, I had a conversation via the good old internet today with Talitha Fraser, who some of you may remember was also, she did a lot of the admin on the first Proust collection and was also an editor on the second Proust collection. She is in Melbourne, and we had, when we threw out the chat on Facebook saying, look, we're thinking about doing something with Proust again, who's interested? There was a spike of interest from a few people in and around Melbourne, some of whom Talitha knows. And what she was reflecting on today was, as well as what you guys have just said, was the way that Proust became something which was willing to showcase things and encourage creativity, but without actually looking for credentials. So she described it as quite a flat space, that it wasn't, there was no hierarchy of access. There was no kind of sense that you had to be important within the church. It was very much looking to connect with people who were maybe on the edges, who were misfits, who didn't fit in. And I absolutely appreciated that. But I mean, a few of you have also mentioned community. What was never part of the ethos, of the stated ethos of Proust previously, was the building of community. It was always about publishing stuff, gathering materials that were already being produced from other communities, perhaps, whether that was the old small missional groups or alternative worship events that were happening up and down the country. And one of the questions that, because if we move us slightly towards the next point on our agenda, which was, how has the landscape of faith changed since then? And this is something that we've been grappling with and talking about within the podcast. Is it true to say that those community groups that were out there before, and that were producing a lot of the materials that became part of the first Proust, are no longer there? Or is it just that I personally and Rob aren't aware of them? Is that stuff all still happening? Are the materials being produced that nobody else is picking up? Or are we actually dealing with a very different kind of Christian diaspora now? And I suppose the associated thing that I wrote down here, were we, or me in particular, too hard on the church with a big C? Am I actually over-egging the pudding by describing the church as increasingly irrelevant? Do we need to be thinking about different kinds of structures and different kinds of communities, different kinds of community gatherings in the way that maybe Matt was saying, where you bring people together to make other stuff happen? Pick your bones from that one. Go on, Leanne.
Yeah, I think just our personal experience here is we are quite often youngsters if we turn up at something churchy. I just think what goes on is quite irrelevant to many people, but people are still interested in spirituality and still want to gather, and so exploring new ways of doing that, and I do think art and creativity is a really helpful expression of our spirituality, and so doing that, like Matt said, collectively, co-creating stuff. Yeah, I really think that is where people are meeting and seeing fresh sort of new expressions of stuff. Yeah,
I think creativity has been the official form of protest for the last few years in this country, and it's been the most effective way to the voice of if you're dissenting against the status quo. I think that it's
one of the few things that won't get you thrown in jail at the moment, isn't it, Deb?
It's interesting. I've heard bits and pieces before, and as I said, wasn't a big part of Proust. I came to it very late. But I go to a church in Milton Keynes, and it's been going for about 13 years. I think I think it was a fresh expression when that was going on in the Church of England, but of course we never called it that. So it's quite a young church in that sense, but also most people are about my age, 42. So there's quite a lots of families, lots of kids. But I think what I would say, I mean, we're still quite a small church, and that's for various different reasons, COVID and all the rest of it. But I think the first thing that came to mind was people still need help. And I think the church is there a lot of times to help people. And I mean that in a very general sense and a very specific sense. And I'm in a part of one of the things that we do in our church is run a charity, which helps to feed children in poverty. And I know that the church and church with a little c and with a big C is very much involved in helping people. And so I think what we've learned as a church, because I've been involved for a long time, is that I think it's less about putting things on that people want to come to, and it's more about getting to know people. I mean, we all know that, don't we? Yeah, I don't know. I from where I'm standing, the church isn't in decline, but then I'm not sure where I'm standing. So yeah, I don't know. I also am very involved in the Field, which is used to be called a youth camp. Now it's called a holiday for 18 to 30 down in Devon at Lee Abbey. And I've been involved with that all my life. And so there's always been somewhere for me to share my work. There's always been somewhere for me to be creative. So I haven't come from like a background of not having anyone to talk to about what I'm interested in. I mean, of course, we all feel like that sometimes, it's not, we all have those moments.
The artist temperament.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it's part of the journey. But I think I sort of haven't had that experience in the same way. I did used to go to an Anglican church with mostly older people who I absolutely loved, and I did have things to learn from. So yeah, I don't know. I think it depends. If we're saying if the church is irrelevant, it depends which church, doesn't it? And I don't know. I just think it depends on your experience, and I think it's really, yeah, I don't know. I guess it depends on, yeah, as I say, on your experience. And I've definitely had terrible ones. So not to say that I haven't, I definitely have when I've been in different places. But yeah, I don't know if that's helpful.
Actually, I find that really helpful. It reminds me of something somebody said to me something I heard at an event many, many years ago, which was that the church with a big C had ceded a lot of ground that it used to hold, so that it only became a religious organization. Whereas historically, it did healthcare, it did education, it did social work. That's what it actually did, and that was the way it, I don't know, worshipped, I suppose. I'm not really sure if that's the right word. And the church, over the course of, I don't know, the last century or more, ceded that ground to government, if you like, to the wider community, and has forever and a day then struggled to claim it back, or failed to claim it back, or not interested in claiming it back. But like you say, there are examples, and clearly where you are, Deb, is slightly perhaps more outward looking, and that's can only be a good thing, can't it? Can only be a good thing.
Yeah, and I wonder if seeing people at their point of need is how you stay relevant. Like, if you, as you say, if that used to be the case, didn't it? With the priories and the monasteries would help people, and they were instrumental in their community, in their small community, but also all over the country. And obviously, that wasn't perfect way of doing things, but that from that point of view, they were central to that community. And I wonder, I mean, I always struggle with, let's create things, and then, whatever it is, and expect people to want it when they don't necessarily need it. But what do they need? And of course, people don't think they need art. People think they don't need to pay for it. People think that it's not essential. And we know, and not just artists, but we all know that actually that's not true. And it does have value, and it is important, but it isn't necessarily as important as, having a meal at the end of the day.
No.
So that's a struggle I face as an art. Probably most of us artists feel the same. What am I doing that's actually going to make any difference? Is it worth it? I don't even make any money to give away to charity. But then I think that it kind of all it should all come together. All those things should come together. While you're sharing a meal, you can share what you've made, or whether that is the meal. That's a creative act. Anyway, I'm rambling, so I'll stop. But
No, not at all, Deb. I kind of sense a lot of the place where you're coming from. Ali, you put your hand up, and I guess I'm wondering how this, given that you are still very much responsible for running a church. I mean, how does this discussion sound from your point of view?
To be honest, oh gosh, I feel quite conflicted in some ways. So my previous job for 8 years is in a benefice of 3 churches, which when I worked, there was myself as an associate priest and then a rector. When I left, was growing. All 3 churches were growing, and with mixed ages and new housing in the community. I absolutely 100% relate to Deb's comment about meeting people at their first need. And I think that actually, Rob, for me, I have seen that happening over and over and over and over again in churches.
In a bit.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ali.
Yeah.
Matt's had to switch because he's switched to his phone because he's got to go and pick his daughter up. And I'm just trying to get your attention, Matt. Can you mute yourself? Because for some reason, it won't let me do it. There we go. Done. Sorry, Ali. Otherwise, we're going to hear Matt's radio over your chat.
That's fine. So
Matt's listening in, but is just driving to fetch his daughter.
So I do
Carry on, Ali. Sorry.
I do think the church hasn't quite ceded all of the ground, but and I think since the cost of living crisis, actually the church has stepped up to the plate in a lot of places. And I also wonder what we mean by church. And I know that we talk about big C, church with a big C, and church with a little c, but I do wonder what we mean by church. And I've moved from that gently growing benefice of 3 churches to a really tiny church in Glasgow. And I sometimes wonder whether I'm there to help it to, actually, I'm not going to say that because this is going online. So I'm just I wonder what our future is together. And but maybe this is really unpopular, but I love the church. I do. I think it's got a place in our communities, and it gets it so wrong, so all the time. But welcome to the human race.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, my dad wasn't very keen on me getting ordained, and I don't know. I just felt I don't want to give up on an institution. I mean, some of it really annoys me, and some of it I really love. And I, yeah, sorry, I could go on and on about this. And there are things, there are some places where the church is really thriving and growing. There are cathedral worship is on the increase, and I think because people there is something about that liminal space that cathedrals give to people that's a touching place for folk. And I think I'm hearing the echoes of the creativity and symbolism and all sorts of things. I come from a much more charismatic background, and my last job was with a very Anglo-Catholic rector, and I love the mix. It's great. But actually, I think partly the Anglo-Catholic stuff was really relating to people because it didn't demand anything of them. It gave them a space to be where they could engage in beautiful art and beautiful imagery and beautiful liturgy. And so I don't know, I'm conflicted. I really get why people get disillusioned and why people have walked away. I really understand that. And, I just think around the issues around human sexuality and all of that. It's, the church has done some terrible damage over the years, not to mention slavery and colonialism and, all the rest of it. We're trying. That's all I'll say.
That's beautifully put, Ali. Beautifully put. Yeah. Steve, you've had your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to echo a lot of what Ali said, because there's the church, the institution, which we can all criticise and see where it's gone wrong. But church as a community, I'm speaking to someone who's born and bred London, where I've always found a church community. Yes, I've been bruised at times. Yes, I've been disappointed, but I've always found community. And I'm part of a growing church, one that values creativity, but also one that focuses outward. And whether that's refugees or prison ministry or soup kitchen, there's so many open doors for the church to serve the community around it. So rather than see Prus as a way of helping us worship in a sort of looking inward, I think for me, having something that's relevant to today's society, that Prus can help contribute to and encourage creativity in the church so that it can show its relevance to the outside world, I think that's a labour that's worth putting energy into. So yeah, I love the church. I see it with warts and all, but I'm fortunate to have come across communities where I feel like I'm at home. I had a big change in my personal circumstances recently, and my family in Southeast London said, "Oh, so you're coming back to us?" And I'm like, no. I have my community in West London, and there's good reason for me to stay in West London because I'm part of the family and that a lot of that is church. So yeah, I'm a banner waving church member, but I love the fact that there's still a need to connect across boundaries, across borders. So last I just went to a Christian Creatives Conference up in Derbyshire, and the number of people who I talked to about their playmaking or their music writing, whatever, who just haven't found a home in the church and are amazed that there's churches out there that do encourage creativity. But for them, they were reaching out to try to find like-minded people. I'm in a church where I'm surrounded by like-minded people, but I count myself very fortunate in that respect.
Michaela?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, when we were involved with Proust as it was because we needed that kind of edgy new language stuff that was outside of what we'd previously recognised, but kind of spoke to where we were at. And now we're not involved in church anymore, which we've not actually said to those that don't know us. I think we imagined that Proust was going to connect with people that were also outside of church, but still seeking a way to express their faith and connect with others, maybe. But I'm kind of recognising as the conversation unfolds, I think you used the words connecting across boundaries, Steve, and I'm wondering if that actually will be something that Proust does. So there may be different sections of resources, and some of them are for church leaders that are looking for something new, and some of them are for people that are outside of church but want some rhythm in their life and, you know, some way to access their spirituality. Like, it can do both, and it doesn't have to try and do one thing that meets both groups of people, but it could actually do both. I've done a really stupid thing and not plugged my laptop in, so I'm just going to go and get my charger.
I mean, Rob's phrase when we were talking
Don't anybody
about...
say anything really exciting, because it won't be minuted.
I'm not going to say anything exciting. You know me, Michaela. Rob's phrase when I think we did that podcast, we were reflecting on the chat with Katie Cross, who is doing the research looking at church leaving and what happens to people, how they adventure into faith beyond the bounds of the institution. And I think, I guess my natural affinity was, well, yeah, somehow I'm one of those people. I mean, we're pioneer community members, but we're not attending regular church worship anymore. There's a long story for that, a long community making interval in the middle of it. But I think Rob's kind of way of putting that is that we're not talking about, or it feels like, and this confirmed by this conversation, it feels like a both and discussion, doesn't it? Not a one or the other. You know, we're not talking about trying to ignore those magnificent people that are still working within church. But in my mind, I still feel that we also need to be mindful of the fact that certainly research of the sort that Katie Cross is doing, and that what's his name, the guy that did the other, his name always slips out of my head when I try and when we get to this point.
Oh, yeah.
Steve Ainsthorpe.
Steve Aisthorpe. That's right. Who said that? That was Leanne, right? Well done. Yeah. So I mean, what that research seems to be showing is that there is a large and growing diaspora of people who used to go to church and don't anymore, and a lot of those people, it would seem to me, are still actively living out a way of faith. Now, that's not necessarily connected to anything, or it might be connected to all sorts of things, like, you know, book clubs or you know, online events or all sorts of things. So there is that other question which has been constantly at the back of my mind, is if that is a growing number, and I think Steve Aisthorpe's question is that if there's a lot of people in that context, probably even more people that are attending the Church of Scotland, which was his research base at the time, then how are they not the body of Christ? How are they not the people who somehow the church needs to be finding a way of serving? Now, I have no axe in the game anymore. I'm not trying to save church. I'm not trying to defend church. I'm just trying to kind of find meaning, and increasingly that's through art, that's through friendship, that's through community. But in the past, that has definitely been through Proust and through resources and those sorts of things as well. So I kind of think that both and thing is still, what do you think, Rob? Still very much in the core of where we're coming from. Really.
Well, I suppose in my heart, I'd say I never thought it would be anything but a both and. I think I always look for a both and in everything, because I think life's taught me that it's never quite black and white. So you have to be, most things are both and. And this conversation has, in many ways, only. See, when I first came across Proust, I don't think I was a part of a church, and that's probably why, almost certainly why I came across it. But over the years, it became the resources that were available, or I was able to come across on Proust or through Proust, were both useful in a church environment or group environment, shall I say, and for me individually on my own. And I think for me that would be was always, I suppose, my hope. Well, I never thought of anything other than that, if that makes sense. And Matt's like he's in a swimming pool. Is she blowing bubbles?
Oh, there you go.
Bless him. So I guess the answer is this conversation has just I suppose confirmed what I hoped, maybe, because I think I want it to be both and I think, again, one of the conversations we had very early on, Chris and I, was about what this group, if anything, looked like. And I want it needs to be diverse with lots of different views and opinions and experiences. Otherwise it'll just dry up, won't it? If everyone just sits around and agreeing with each other entirely and actually can speak for each other because they know what everyone else is going to think, then that will become very dull very quickly, won't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't have thought that was a place for people to be creative. Not really. So there you go.
I think Michaela and Deb had their hands up. I think, Michaela, you were first.
Oh, no, it was just to say, I'm not sure, Chris, if you're seeing what's in the chat, but Mark put in a quote, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go and do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And Steve said, if we use language in Proust that's relevant outside the church, then it will be kept relevant to those inside as well. I don't know if those of you that are inside church can maybe, well, Steve's inside church, so I guess he knows.
I think that's, sorry.
And Mark and Leanne, just give us a wave when you need to go so we can say goodbye properly. You've got to go in a few.
Sorry, Deb, and then Ali.
Yeah, I'm interested because we're spending time talking about people inside and people outside of the church, and I'm just interested in talking about the institution, and I'm just interested kind of what we mean by that. I guess what you mean by that is people going on a Sunday to a congregation or a community, but because for me a community, I would call that a church. Like Greenbelt I would call a church. You know what, I'm just interested in that, in sort of what people are. I mean, I realise there are people who do never want to be near a Christian community again, and that's obviously outside, but I'm just interested in how we're defining our terms, really.
Ali, do you want to have a go at answering that?
That's interesting because, oh, sorry, Chris.
Let Ali speak first, Michaela.
Michaela, it's fine. No, it's okay, Michaela, on you go.
I was just going to say, Deb, I would always say that I am now outside the church, but actually we're associate member of Iona Community, but I wouldn't count that as church. I don't know.
That's really interesting, Michaela, because I probably would. So I just think there's something around our definitions. I worked at Tear Fund for 8 years. Tear Fund is not a church, but for at least 2 or 3 of the years that I was in Tear Fund were the years that I struggled most with church and didn't really go very much. And Tear Fund became my church. And it's a charity. And that's because of the relationships that I made there. It's because of the community of people that were there. So I really relate to what you're saying, Deb, because for me, it's about people. Yes, there's all the baggage that comes with the institution. I really that. And I don't really know what to do with that. And I find it endlessly frustrating. But at the same time, not sure what I'm trying to say. I'm not sure I know what I think, really, but anyway.
Chris, you had your hand up.
I did, yeah. So part of me, the cynical mischievous part of me wants to say this is sort of irrelevant because the definition of church or an institution changes from person to person. And I think one of the most upsetting moments of the lockdown for me was hearing the Archbishop of Canterbury going in public and saying, we need to have people in a church on a Sunday morning because that is the work of the church. And I had spent 2 months building a podcast version of a silly little service I did for 6 people once a month, to release on the internet to reach the people that wanted to hear it. We had spent however many months delivering meals to people and checking in on people, and suddenly it was reduced to 45 minutes to an hour and a half on a Sunday morning in definition. And I don't think for a second that represents what everybody in the Church of England thinks. I don't necessarily believe that it is what Justin Welby believes, but I think one phrasing on one day can change the entire meaning of what a church is in the minds of thousands of people. And yeah, so there is a bit of me that sort of thinks that this, maybe we shouldn't think about the church. And I think the phrase that keeps singing out in my head was, I can't remember who said it, but meeting people at their point of need feels to me like the core, not just of church, but of this. And everything we've said just keeps circling back to that in my to me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Chris.
Sorry, me again. I wanted to agree with what the quotation that Mark put in, and I think there's always that wanting to meet people at their point of need, but also saying what's important to you. So what your passion is, what you want to write about, because creativity, like, we know what happens when you try and push an agenda into creativity. It just makes it absolute shit. So
it becomes propaganda.
Yeah, and so obviously nobody wants, or at least people shouldn't want that, in my opinion. But equally, any human story is a human story, whether that's a story, literal story or a song or a poem or whatever. And so that is going to meet people. And we all know, don't we, the mental health crisis that's going on. Probably most of us have had problems with mental health or something similar, or grief, or, not hopefully, but I think all humans can connect with that. And I wonder if that's the point, or one of the points of need that Proust can address. And it doesn't have to be, I don't mean like writing out a prescription, but poetry, music, art, visual art, that, I think people need that, however much they don't realise it. And I think that's what we've all talked about. And I wonder if, and the need of people perhaps who feel they're outside of the church, or whether they're in the church and they feel lonely, or whether they're in the church and they just want more, then perhaps that's what can be offered. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that sounds really good, because it means we can just stop talking about it all and just say, look, here are some resources, and whoever wants them can use them, and we don't have to define it as. Yeah.
I think I would agree with I think in my mind there's a slight but, which is to do with trauma and to do with people who feel themselves firmly outside church, to do with a generation or 2 generations of people who just don't see the church as a safe place to make spiritual adventures anymore. So I think all of what you're saying I agree with, and all of what you're saying I've been part of in the past and been very grateful for. But I'm also seeing this other as well, through lots of people that I've met, through people that come and talk to me about poetry and burst into tears, but there's no part of that allows them to think that the church will be a place that they could go to with that. Now, that might just be the old discussions that we've had for years about making church more accessible, more available to people, more kind of whatever. But I don't think it's just that. I think there are some other issues that are at work in society which are very difficult to define, to do with the way that people understand the nature of spirituality now, to do with something to do with individualism, something to do with pluralism, something to do with tradition and conservatism and all that kind of stuff as well, and the way that people engage with those ideas and issues. But, you know, that's not to say that I think we've still come back to Rob's original point of both and. So, Michaela, you have your
Yeah, I'm just thinking, do you think that all needs to be defined before Proust can start gathering materials, or is that
no?
Are can those things be explored as Proust materials? Yeah.
There's the question.
I think I'd go back a step further. I'd go back a step, and just when Chris asked the question, what would you like to preserve? I was delighted. Maybe was I surprised? I don't know. Maybe it's just naturally these things came out. But the things I wrote down was, and I had a sense of a safe place to be creative. And from that, I would add on: are there people who could mentor people to be better at what they do? Is that an okay thing to say? I'm not a overtly creative person, so I would say, is it okay to say that you know, to make the best of what talent you have? Is that okay? And to be shown how to do things maybe better? Is that, I think, then somebody, so that was a safe place to be creative. There was a sense of which Proust was a publishing house. So actually giving people a place to publish their work in again, safe, with much less judgment. Or without needing a publishing house or an editor to actually sign it off or approve it or whatever, that actually that's what we're here for. We want to give people an outlet for their creativity. That's probably what I'm trying to say, isn't it? There was a sense in which publishing, I wrote down new liturgies. I don't know if the person who said that really meant liturgy, but it was like resource for community worship, if you want to put it that way. I don't, but you can use liturgy in private anyway. But that sort of thing was I always thought was really strong in old Proust, that the stuff that people wrote or were using in their communities as an aid to worship, again, is something I would love to tap into. And then I think, Chris, you raised music. Chris Foster raised music as a big deal to you when you first came across it. That and I think we haven't really mentioned music much. It's very much a sort of, but I think having a place for music in this would be great. So, Michaela, I think you said, do we have to define this? I think that would be I think that'd be a disaster, because I would suggest that we'd spend 6 months deciding what the definition is, never being happy with it, and never creating anything. So I would be saddened if we got stuck on that. I think we just want to do the things which we originally... I think it's really helpful having this conversation, because what it does do is brings in different voices and different views. But actually, we wanted Proust to be a creative community, didn't we, Chris? That's sort of how it started. So let's not. May I suggest humbly that let's not be too definitive about what that looks like.
Frankie, you had your hand up just then.
Yeah, so I've just been listening, because I had no idea what Proust was, so I'm just gaining a bit of an idea of that.
Yeah, well, don't look up the old website whenever.
Anyway, and I'm hearing all of the discussions about, you know, is church still relevant? Is it not? And I think, you know, it is for some, and depending on what the church is, and it all means something different to everybody, I think. But I think what I wrote down in terms of, right, so this is very personal to me, what I would appreciate from something somewhere is a space, a creative space for growth. And I don't even think for me that means having something tangible that I've created. That might be, you know, an experience of being in nature and just being able to tap into what's in my core which is where I believe that God sits and I can hear him, and that's where, or him, they, whoever, but that's where, to get back in touch with that essence of what I believe God is. Somebody said something about not demanding anything of you, and that really resonated. And just a thought that I have is, can any community never demand anything of you? Which brings me back to that safe place that you were talking about, Chris. So, is there somewhere we can have a place where is really safe to be held while we explore whatever we need to explore in creative ways? I certainly think since COVID, what I've noticed is that people are much more I found that whole period was where people were really starting to question what things were all about, what life was about, what I was about, and I saw, and maybe it was the work I was involved in at the time, but I really saw people tap into that creativity. People were writing poems and, going for walks in nature and reflecting on that. This is just notes that are coming out of my head here, so I hope that's all right. And something that is, and I think this comes back to the not demanding of anyone, and that might be where I am in my life at the moment as well, is that sense of gentleness. Actually, and I always go back to that, one of the phrases in the Bible that always comes back to me is, he will not break a bruised reed. And I get quite emotional about that, but just that, I just wonder, is there any way we can create that safe space where no matter how bruised we are, we'll not be broken, but actually can find a place where we can be supported gently, whether that's in or outside of a church. Who knows? It could be in church for some people, and it could be outside, and it could be both. And
wow, yeah. Well, my answer to that is yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I suppose one of the I'm just looking at the time and thinking we should maybe move towards some kind of final summary of some of the discussions that we've got to. My instinct is that there's this constant pull between the spirituality as an individual journey of self-actualization. But then there's this other thing about how you collectivize that and what happens when those individual journeys come together. Because, individuality is probably both the strength of our age, but also the Achilles heel of our age. And it's we kind of feel like that church was previously one of the main ways that people kind of collectivized. Maybe it's still football, maybe it's still sometimes church, but increasingly people are scattered, and so coming together seems to be a really important part of that. So I'm just looking down our list. I think we've done 1. I think we've done 2. I think we've done quite a bit of 3. We haven't done much of 4. So we haven't got very far down our list, but I found that discussion really, really helpful. I'm just wondering whether it would be useful just for pulling together, towards the last 5 minutes, in us saying a little bit about where we're thinking about going now. Do we know that yet, Rob? I'm not sure we do. But just a few threads that were the things that were out there. So you may have seen bits of this or heard bits of this on the podcast. But what a new Proust would look like is very much to do with what, the collective that gathers around the idea of a new Proust think that we collectively need. And so that's what these discussions are about. We had this rough idea of kind of like different hubs. So, whether one was music, one was writing, one was art, visual art, one was film, and just allowing community to gather around each of those hubs and allowing creative people to come together to kind of mentor, support, encourage, look to gather resources that could be made available to other people. That was some of the thinking. But I would add another bit to that, which is something that I've written about on my blog and talked about on the podcast, is that I have this feeling as well that it will still be helpful to bring together some of that creative diversity within one place. So to have events that allow us to kind of explore some of these ideas, to showcase them. I think I even have this grandiose title of Circus of the Spirit, which I feel a little bit kind of uncomfortable with. So I don't think we'll call it that, or maybe we should. I don't know. But that was the idea.
What's it in Latin?
or Gallic, maybe.
Yes, that'd be even better than.
It's probably circus. Yeah. Anyway, so the threads of that then are very much those things happen if enough of us gather to make them happen, or they don't happen. I mean, it feels like our strength at the moment may well be looking at publishing poetry. I actually had to bat somebody. No, that's not quite true. There are always people wanting to find an outlet to write in, and that would be a good thing to do. As we know, it releases people, it empowers people into all sorts of good things. Michaela has her hand up, but you're muted.
We've also got artists and photographers present in the group, as well as the poets.
Oh yeah, I know. I wasn't meaning that. I was just in terms of the sort of discussions that we'd had. But I think Rob's wisdom from our discussion yesterday we're in no hurry to do something for the sake of doing it. I think we need to take a considered jump into whatever we do next, rather than just doing something for the sake of it. And there's unless suddenly we feel this overwhelming collective idea, let's do 1, 2, 3, in which case we do 1, 2, 3. Anything else to add, anyone, in the last few minutes of our chat? Rob?
Well, first of all, I would like to express my immense gratitude for you all to joining in. I think that's my biggest takeaway. Quite apart from it, everything else, quite apart from anything else, my experience over the last few months of doing the podcast and speaking to people whom I've never met and just listening. Was it Deb? Did you say about people's story? Or somebody said no, Frankie, you did. Also, anyway, whoever. Story is the most powerful thing we have, I think. It goes way beyond traditional teaching, and I'm sure most of us used to get really bored when we were preached at. But if somebody started telling a story about how they got to where they are and why they feel the way they feel, then that suddenly you sit up and start listening, because they're actually telling you something about themselves, which is far more important to me anyway. So I think Proust will be a place of story. I think that's really good. But anyway, I don't know how I got sidetracked. I don't know where my brain was going there. But I'm really grateful for you all joining in, most of all. I think I don't want to sound... Me and Chris have had this conversation about structure and... Well, we started, amongst it's about structure and how this will work. And I don't think... I've got some thoughts bubbling around now as a result of today, but I think I'd probably save them for another day, because that's probably just not fair on anybody. But most of all, I'm just really grateful. And I hope, what I want to ask is, are you all in the Proust Facebook group? And if you're not, please, okay. Excellent, thumbs up. Those are the ones I like. Because that's really helpful, because we know that you're there, that if we post anything, we know that at least certain people are going to see it. That's really important. And yeah, I think I've rambled, and it is 20:30 according to the clock.
It is. So I'll add my thanks, and we'll produce some kind of record of this discussion, some notes, and that. And presumably we will also think about the what next in the course of time. So thank you so much for coming, everyone. I hope it's been helpful and useful to you, as it has been to us. And
I've loved it.
we will speak again. Okay.